How's it going, everyone? Yo, it's your boy Corey, aka Crasher, here with a new video, and ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna be getting into a spicy one here in this video, because the Smogon Community has made their first suspect test announcement for Scarlet and Violet OU, and it's Terastallization that is on the butcher block. This is going to be interesting. With the release of Scarlet and Violet, Pokemon bestowed upon us the novel mechanic of Terastallization. This core feature has defined Pokemon's 9th generation throughout its infancy, changing the type of game we play. Terastallization has simultaneously energized certain contingents of the player base while drawing the ire of many others, making it one of the most polarizing tiering topics in Smogon's long history. Given the gravity of the situation and the scattered assessment of Terastallization's place in a competitive environment from our constituents internally, the SVOU Tiering Council has taken numerous steps to gauge community-wide perspective and help progress discussions, such as opening accessible discussion threads on the topic of Terastallization, conducting a community tiering survey on the topic of Terastallization, posting our thoughts publicly on the topic of Terastallization in the policy review thread, using the data from the aforementioned threads and survey to engage in internal discussions. Ultimately, we have determined that a public suspect test with a creative voting structure would best capture the situation for our community, given everything that was presented. This suspect test will help determine the best way for us to tier Terastallization in the Scarlet and Violet overused metagame. However, it is entirely possible, but not certain, that we re-evaluate whatever conclusion is drawn with another suspect in the future. Before we get into the logistics behind the vote and what you will need to do in order to qualify to vote, let's discuss Terastallization in the metagame and why people may want to keep it, restrict it, or ban it. In addition, what possible restrictions are on the table. Terastallization as a mechanic takes a plethora of different forms in the SVOU metagame. It is a mechanic that can be applied for both offensive and defensive purposes across the board, and many different Pokemon threaten to Terastallize in our metagame. While impossible to sum up the entirety of Terastallization's place in the metagame to just a few paragraphs, we can absolutely generalize how it is used and the strategy or lack thereof behind it. On many offensive Pokemon, Terastallization can be used to bolster their offensive profile in one of numerous ways. The brute force that comes with stab or same type attack bonus Terastallization, which gives the most potent attackers in the metagame a boost akin to adaptability for the remainder of a battle. We can already make fierce presences such as Chi-Yu, Dragapult, or Chien-Pao virtually uncounterable. However, this comes alongside the drawback of not being able to use Terastallization to alter your typing drastically to refocus certain forms of counterplay, thus maintaining type-based defensive responses in some scenarios if you are not outright overpowered by the 2 times boosted moves. In addition, there's some strategic value that comes alongside maximizing how you utilize this specific boosting mechanism. Many also believe there is a large component of guesswork that makes this less competitively appealing though. Alternatively, many other offensive presence are able to use non-stab Terastallization to shift their entire profile within the context of a game, granting them potential for free turns and additional stab on complementary attacks. This makes Pokemon such as Dragonite, Roaring Moon, Espathra, and Annihilate particularly menacing when you cannot be sure what to use to keep them in check, as the pool of Pokemon that contain them with their original typing differs from the pool of Pokemon that may be able to keep them in check with a suddenly new typing. This dynamic is unlike anything we have seen in competitive Pokemon, and some have cited increased abilities to adapt to this aspect of the mechanic with more exposure as specific Terra types become more predictable and the Terra metagame grows more optimized over time. Moreover, there is a timing component to this that is similar to the above with stab Terastallization that makes enacting this strategy come with some risk and a great opportunity cost, but but there is also the flip side, where bluffing or deciding to terastallize can make singular sequences carry disproportionate amount of weight towards dictating game outcomes rather than deeper competitive strategizing. Shifting gears, there are also some defensively oriented applications of terastallization that Pokemon can use as preventative measures or to increase counterplay towards some of the aforementioned dangers the metagame prevents. For example, a Pokemon can shift their typing through terastallization to thwart sweeping or breaking attempts that the opponent tries to enact. Skeledirge oftentimes terastallizes into a fairy type in order to neutralize ground types or minimize dark types, while King Gambit occasionally terastallizes into a flying type to lure would-be super effective fighting and ground attacks from foes such as Great Tusk. Even things like Hatterene can threaten many teams with the option to terastallize into a largely neutral type like water, giving it much more room to operate. These countermeasures have not been classified as problematic relative to other examples mentioned and may constitute healthier applications of terastallization, but also can be seen as an overexpansion of counterplay that stunts progress within the confines of the metagame. Needless to say, there are far more applications of terastallization that can be found within the metagame that span beyond what any singular post can possess. The ultimate thesis of the side favoring action would be that the improvements provided through use of the mechanic, which are alluded to above, provide a boost that is unreasonable to account for in the team builder or the battle within the context of a competitively focused metagame state. However, the conclusion drawn by the camp believing terastallization should remain fully intact tends to subscribe to the narrative that any uses of the mechanic are reasonable to account for while maintaining a competitive environment that promotes strategy in the builder and game rather than overwhelming variance. Now, as far as the suspect test information goes, we typically don't go over that. However, what's really interesting is that for the first time in the history of Smogon, we actually have something that really stands out, where we can have ourselves one of various outcomes when it comes to tiering action on terastallization. Number one is an outright ban, so terastallization will no longer be usable in SVOU. One Terra user per team. Only the first member of your party will be allowed to terastallize during the course of the battle. Reveal Terra type at team preview, so any Pokemon can terastallize, but the type they would do so into is disclosed at team preview prior to a battle, and the last option is only stab Terra types allowed. Any Pokemon can terastallize, but they may only do so to types that match their initial stab typings. Okay, I'm gonna be completely frank here when I say this actually kind of surprises me. Going into this, I was 100% not on board with suspect testing terastallization because typically, at least as far as Smogon OU goes, when something gets suspect tested, more often than not, it gets banned. And in Generation 8, they ended up banning Dynamax/Gigantamax, which was a core battle mechanic that Sword and Shield introduced. And with Generation 9 introducing terastallization and Smogon putting on a suspect test yet again for another battle mechanic, I thought to myself, Jesus Christ, man, we're going to be going into Generation 8 all over again. It's going to be bland, flat, and boring. However, I actually kind of like the approach here where instead of outright banning something, they are looking to take a different course of action rather than outright banning something. We have ourselves different methods here when it comes to managing terastallization without outright banning it. I will give some pretty big credit here to the Smogon community for this. Job well done. However, I do still remain firm that terastallization should be left well enough alone. We're barely a month into Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and already we have ourselves a massive bombshell of a suspect test. However, I will say I don't completely disagree with how they're doing it here. I actually really can get down with this. However, I do want to make one comment here in regards to the wording of the suspect test thread here, and that would be this right here. It kind of seems like that they're implying that there is no strategy or a lack thereof when it comes to strategy behind using Terastallization. Here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, is that you can only use Terastallization once per battle. If you go with Terastallization on one of your Pokemon, you have to commit to that. And if you happen to Terastallize the wrong Pokemon at the wrong time, well, that kind of screws you over. It nips you in the butt. So it's all about timing. It's all about managing what Pokemon you should Terastallize, what you shouldn't Terastallize, things like that. So there definitely is a lot of strategy behind using Terastallization. You got to really think what Pokemon is best suited for Terastallization in any battle that you end up going in. It definitely takes a lot more strategy to use something like Terastallization than to use something like Landorus because of how spammable it is. It is so easily splashable on competitive teams. You don't even really need to know how to use it in order for it to be on your team and to be used effectively. There is not as much strategy to use something like Landorus as opposed to using something like Terastallization. It's fresh, it's brand new. This is something that the community has to adapt to, and if it happens to be deemed too strong or too problematic, well then, you know what? That's their prerogative. They can do what they wish. I'm just simply giving my own thoughts and opinions on the matter, and while I might not be active in the Smogon community in terms of ranking up on ladder and stuff like that, I do keep tabs, and I do have around a decade of experience when it comes to competitive battling. So, you know, I happen to know a couple of things here or there, you know what I'm saying? Like, I might be out of step every once in a while, but this crazy nuthouse hasn't forgotten how to dance, if you know what I'm saying. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that's about all I have to say here in regards to this subject. I kind of already gave my opinions about this in my previous video relating to Smogon. I will link you guys to that in the description down below if you guys are interested in hearing me out. But I will also link you guys to the original source here, so that way you guys can read everything in its entirety. And do let me know what you guys think about this. Do you guys agree with the suspect test? Do you guys disagree with the suspect test? Do you guys happen to agree or disagree with the methods that they are going with when it comes to the suspect test? Once again, I do gotta give kudos where kudos is due. They are taking this actually a lot more carefully, and they are very much aware as to how polarizing this whole thing is. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna be it here for the video. Thank you guys very much for watching. Thank you for your time as well in viewing this video. Have yourself a damn good one, you beautiful people, and I'll see you next time.